Freqtrade is a free and open source crypto trading bot written in Python. It has everything you need to get started with automatically trading crypto all in one box. So the purpose of this video is to show you how to get up and running with Freqtrade using Docker. So I have the Docker Compose file right here. I have Freqtrade, and you see the workers here are up and running locally. And I also have a local UI here where we can set up an account for managing our bot. So what we're gonna do is first get Docker installed, get Freqtrade up and running locally so that you have a UI like this. You have these workers running, you can see the logs here. And we'll also dive into the user data directory that Freqtrade sets up. We'll go through some of the structure here on how Freqtrade stores backtest results, how it stores data, historical data from different exchanges, this hyper optimization functionality for optimizing its strategy, log files, Jupyter notebooks, how it stores plots, the strategies directory where you can store your own strategies, the configuration file, and the SQLite database structure. And I'll also talk a little bit about the Docker file and how all of that works. We'll do a dry run with simulated money on our local machine first, and then after we're comfortable with how all of this is functioning and running locally with fake money, we'll then deploy it to a real live server. I'll show you how to connect it to a real exchange, and so we can trade real money, real trades, real learning, and have it running on a Linode server or whichever server you want. That just happens to be the one I use, and we'll look at some of the different stats, the dashboard, explore the dashboard, and some of the configuration options here so that you can tweak this and make it your own. All right, so the key to get started here is you want to get to the website for Freqtrade. It's at freqtrade.io. You can Google it, you know how to do it. And you want to go to Quick Start with Docker. I'm going to use Docker to install this. Technically, you can do this manual installation and run all these different scripts and whatnot, install all these packages separately, but it's actually a little bit more complicated because I know some of you have run into issues like installing TALib on Windows and things like that. So there's all these extra steps. Whereas if you do it with Docker, it has all those dependencies nicely described in this Docker Compose file. You can just pull the image and you can get up and running pretty quickly. So to run a Docker image, to run a Docker container, you have to have Docker on your machine first. So I'm going to just search, go to the docker.com homepage and go to get started. And I just need Docker Desktop. Download the one for your chip. I have an Apple Mac chip, so I'm going to download this edition and install it. So that is downloading a GMG file, but obviously if you're on Windows or Linux, there's a different version there. And I'm going to be installing the Linux version whenever we deploy to Linode. All right, so that's done downloading. So I can just open this up here, and on Mac, I just drag it to my applications. In Windows, it'll run a setup there. And it's copying Docker to my applications. And after that, I should have Docker. And when I go to the command line, hopefully I have a couple of commands, Docker Compose, that I can run to work with this Docker Compose file. All right, so now that I have Docker installed, I should be able to go over to my terminal now, and I will have a new command. Bam, Docker, and I can see all these subcommands I can run. If I want to list all my Docker images, I type Docker images. If I want to pull an image, I can run a Docker pull. And we're going to pull the Docker image from Freqtrade's repository down to our local machine. So they have this nice image that's all maintained with the latest stuff, latest dependencies. And then once we pull that image, we can bring it up on our machine, and we'll have Freqtrade running on our machine just like that. So let's do that now. So let's go back over to the Freqtrade, a quick start with Docker here. We already installed Docker, and so they're going to use a command called Docker Compose here. And so let's look at this quick start. The first thing they want you to do is to create a new directory here. They called it FT user data. I don't really like that name. I'm going to call it Freqtrade demo, right, like that. And I'm going to go into that directory, Freqtrade demo, and I have this nice empty directory here. So now that we have this empty directory where we're going to store everything, we need to get a copy of this Docker Compose YAML file. That's a description of what's needed to run Freqtrade in Docker. And so I'm going to run this command. They give a copy paste that uses curl, right? And so this just requests a copy of this YAML file and then saves it locally as Docker Compose YAML. And if I list right here, you'll see It's Docker Compose YAML is there now. And before you download stuff to your desktop and run it, it's a good idea to take a peek at it. So I'm going to paste that in, and so you can just see what's in here. So what I'm going to do now is to go to Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to open this Freqtrade demo folder that I had created on my desktop so that we have it here and I can look at this Docker Compose file locally. Now, if you didn't have curl on your machine for whatever reason, you can actually just copy this file here and just bring it locally. You don't have to use curl. All right, so let's take a quick look at the Docker Compose YAML file right here. So what this is a description file. It describes the image that we're going to pull down, what volumes are going to be mounted, ports that are going to be open, and the command that's going to run whenever we bring this thing up. And so a Docker Compose file may have multiple services. In the case, for instance, last year, I made one called TradeKit that had a whole bunch of different dependencies here. I made a video on that. And what this does is package up a bunch of different libraries, frameworks, data visualization libraries, indicator libraries, all that kind of thing, all in one. And I have a Docker Compose file here. You see, I haven't updated this in a long time. So that's one drawback I gave to using things that are written by one person who moves on to many different things, is that it doesn't get any updates for a while. But you can see I had a Docker Compose file here with TradeKit, and it had multiple services. So it ran the timescale time series database, and it also ran a web server here for Uvicorn, and then it opened some ports. And this web server depended on timescale being started first. So you can describe all these different dependencies in this Docker Compose file here. So if I jump back to the Freqtrade Docker Compose YAML file here, you'll see it has image here, and it has Freqtrade org Freqtrade stable. And if I search on Google for this, you'll see it pulls up a Docker Hub as the first result. And this is basically a repository of all the different Docker images, and you can pull that image down. And if you go under tags here, you'll see there's new images released all the time. So they're packaging up all the dependencies and everything necessary to run Freqtrade, all the latest versions, and pushing it up here. And you can see last pushed a day ago, last pushed a day ago. And if you scroll back 5 days ago, so you see there's frequent releases of this thing. Whereas if you look at my Docker image here, you see I'm not really making any updates. Whereas a community project like Freqtrade with lots of different developers is going to have lots of activity. And so you want to use a framework that has a lot of activity. If it hasn't had an update in a couple years, chances are the author's moved on to something else, or it's not going to get updated that frequently. So jumping back to the quick start, now that I have this Docker Compose YAML file locally, I need to pull the Freqtrade image. So I'm going to type Docker Compose pull, and I need to run that in the directory where I have this Docker Compose YAML file, because this has the name of the image that I'm pulling. So I'm pulling this Freqtrade stable image here. And so I'm going to type Docker Compose pull, and that will pull the image. And what you see here is it says connection refuse error. So it couldn't communicate for whatever reason. And the reason for that is I actually didn't start up Docker Desktop. I have the Docker command line script that I'm running here, but I didn't actually start up Docker Desktop. So I'm going to run Docker Desktop here. And that's going to start Docker Desktop, and I should have this little whale icon in the top right of my screen. It's not you can't see it on my screen right now, but it's starting up, and you should see a little whale icon. So now that this has started up, I should be able to run that Docker Compose command. So I'm going to try that again. Docker Compose pull, and it's going to communicate with my Docker Desktop and pull the image. So you see it's downloading stuff. It's saying pulling Freqtrade, and this should pull the image locally. And it's done. Now I can type the command Docker images, and I can see the different images that I've pulled to my machine. Since I've used Docker a lot, you can see a lot of different images I've pulled over the course of the past couple of months here. And so you can see I've pulled the timescale DB image, Redis, Freqtrade before, TradeKit, Rsi Trade, which we'll go over in one of the follow-up videos probably next week. And yeah, I've pulled different versions of Freqtrade. So there's a development version and there's a stable version. We're using the stable version right now. All right, so I've pulled the Docker image, but how do I actually use it, right? So the next couple of things we need to do is to create a user directory structure. So that's shown here. And so you just run this command, right, in my command line, and I'm going to run Docker Compose, run Freqtrade, create user directory, a user directory, and then I give it the name of the directory, and it's user data, right? And says it created some stuff. So if I list inside of the directory, you see there's now a user data directory. And if I go to VS Code here, you'll see my user data directory. Look at all this. We have a structure here, a set of folders that stores all kinds of different stuff. So we have backtest results. We haven't run any backtests yet, but that data will appear in here when we start running backtests. We have a data directory, hyper optimization results. You see there's one example here for hyper optimization. So this is the sample hyper opt loss class. We have a logs folder here, which stores logs. We have notebooks, so we can look at different Jupyter notebooks, do some analysis in Jupyter. We have a plotting directory, so when we create visualizations of our strategies, we create matplotlib plots. Those will be stored in here. And then we have a sample strategy here that extends the iStrategy class. And so we can modify the code for the sample strategy right here. And then obviously we have our Docker Compose YAML file here that we started with, right? And so I ran that command and it just created those folders. So if you decide to use Freqtrade a lot, one of the things is you're going to be using a lot of command line commands like this. So Freqtrade, create user directory, Freqtrade, new config. Whenever you're doing backtesting, for instance, you're gonna run Freqtrade backtesting and pass it a bunch of parameters. So it's very important to get really good at using the documentation and just running these commands. And you'll probably set up some aliases so you don't have to type this same thing over and over again. So the next command we need to run before we can bring this container up, we need to create a configuration file, right? And so I'm going to copy that and then paste it in. And so Docker Compose run Freqtrade new config, and then we give it the name of our config file. And it's gonna write this file after we answer a couple of questions at this interactive prompt. It says, do you want to enable dry run simulated trades? I'm going to say yes here, since this is the first time we're testing it. We want to simulate this before we run it with real money, which we're going to do in a few minutes. Insert your stake currency. I'm using USDT. Put whatever one you want there. The next question is to insert your stake amount, a number or unlimited. So you can say, oh, if my strategy hits a signal and buys, use everything available in my account, or you can specify a certain number. So maybe I only want to use $10 at a time or $100 at a time. I put 100 here, and that's what I did on the live trading bot here that I showed. So this one's been running. I'm actually a whole day has passed and I'm recording again. And so now it's July 8th. You see 3 more trades, 3 more winners have come in here. So trade 30, 31, and 32 here. So you see some configuration for this bot that's running right now. It has a stop loss of 10% configured. And then you see this close reason ROI. What this is doing is it's configured now to take a 1% profit no matter what's going on. If I am up 1%, it sells it. And you can see this is just taking 1% profits over and over again. And the stake amount is 100. And so you can see each time it made a buy. So for Aave, Sushi, Doge, whatever, it staked $100. And so it bought 1463 Dogecoin here. You can see it bought 0.085 Ethereum here, and then it just took 1% profits. And crazy right now, you're not going to get these results. This just coincidence, but out of 32 trades here, this has now had, I think 30 out of 32 have been profitable. And you can see the stop loss 10% configured here. There's only been one stop loss here, this Ethereum trade right here, which entered at, I think, 1132 and then closed at 1014 here at a 10% loss. But there are so many winners that, we're up another $3 here. So there's only been that one down day. So yeah, I can buy another Starbucks coffee for myself today. So back to the command line, I'm staking $100 at a time. This will do a dry run of it. This live version I have is using my real money. I was comfortable just trading around $500 or $600 to start with. You can use however much money you want to try this out. Please insert max open trades. And so what this means is I only open 3 trades at a time. And so let's say I am only trading $500, but 20 different signals fire. I don't want to open 20 trades at $100. That's more money than I have. And I don't want to use any leverage in this case, even though Freqtrade does have support for that. I just want to open 3 at a time. So I don't want to go crazy with the trades. Just open 3 trades at a time. And then it says, have the strategy define the time frame or override in configuration. I'm going to define the time frame in my strategy. My display currency is US dollars. Then it tells me to select an exchange. I know a lot of folks out there use Binance. A lot of folks out there use FTX. So these are some of the most popular exchanges. It uses CCXT, which I've done a video on. So CCXT supports many different exchanges. So these are the most popular ones, but there's some other exchanges that are less well tested. I know Alpaca, who is a sponsor of this channel, please check the link below, is going to integrate with CCXT very soon. So there's a pull request in for that. So be on the lookout for that. So I am going to choose, in this case, FTX. And then do I want to enable Telegram? I'm going to say no because I don't have Telegram enabled right now. But I do want to say yes to this REST API because I want to use this web interface. And this web interface won't work unless I enable the REST API. And it says insert API server listen address. And I'm just running this on localhost right now. So I'm going to say 127.0.0.1, which is localhost. I need to give it a username and password. Freqtrade is the default one. I give it a password, and this is where you log in on the web, so you need to give it a username and password. And I'm going to use a very simple one right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And don't worry, I'm not putting this online right now, so you can't mess with it. So I will delete this shortly thereafter. So Freqtrade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this writes a configuration file. So if I list my directory here and I look in user data, you'll see there's this config JSON file in here. And let's just take a look at this in more detail in Visual Studio Code. My config JSON, I answered some questions, and then it generated this JSON data so that I didn't have to type this myself. Max open trades 3, stake amount 100, tradable balance ratio, dry run true, so I'm simulating orders, and entry pricing, exit pricing, all the different stuff here. So exchange configuration, so it says name FTX, and all I need to bring to trade my personal account, if I want to do that with real money, which we'll do in a moment, I just give it my API key and API secret, and then it can connect to my FTX API and start trading my account. Right now, it's just set up to do a simulated test. We have pairless here. And so what this is configured to do now is to dynamically determine which pairs to trade. So if I go to the UI here and go to my pair list here, you see here are all the different currencies it's trading. So Uniswap, Chainlink, Ethereum, Bitcoin, a bunch of the other ones. And so it looks at the top traded by volume and uses those assets. But what I can do, this is a dynamic pair list. So when I start this up, it determines which pairs to trade. But if I want to say only use these 3 currencies, so let's say I only want to trade Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana, I can give it a static pair list. And I'll show you how to do that, where you can just list the 3 different pairs you want to trade, and I'll just trade those. Let's see, what else? Telegram is disabled, API server here. So you see it's listening on port 8080. I'll show you how to deploy this remotely and have it listen where you can access it from anywhere you want to or specific IP addresses. That's the name of the bot. And yeah, that's all we need to look at for now. So it's ready to run. So I'm going to go back to the top level directory where my Docker compose file is. I'm going to type Docker compose up, and that's going to bring up my container. So it says creating Freqtrade, and look at that. You see all these beautiful log messages, and we have Freqtrade up and running, logging lots of detailed information. Let me make this a little bigger. And so what that does, it brings it up and then starts running the strategy. So how did it know to run that strategy? I didn't just tell it to do that. So let's go back to our Docker compose YAML file here. And so I remember I said this tells it what to do, like what image to pull and which ports to expose and what to do when it starts up. That's it right here. So when this starts up, it's going to run this command. This is running a command line command, right? So it's running trade, and then it ran log file, Freqtrade log. You can see I have this nice log file here with all the same information so that I can go check on the spot later. I didn't need to write all this code myself. And then I can go back to my Docker Compose. It gives it a DB URL, so a SQLite database where it's going to store the data. And you see I also have this Trades v3 SQLite database right here. So there's a relational database running locally here. This is my config file, and it says -- strategy sample strategy. So as I mentioned in the benefits of using a framework, we didn't need to write any logging functionality. It just logs for us. We didn't need to decide how to structure our strategy. We just need to extend a strategy class. We didn't need to determine a configuration file structure or need to worry about the structure of this database. The main thing is you just need to bring your approach to the market, your strategy right here. What does this strategy class look like? Well, you see that it imports NumPy and pandas, so very basic. You just use pandas to define your strategy. You can see you extend this iStrategy class, and you just need to define a few parameters here: your stop loss, your return on investment, whether you're setting a trailing stop, what time frame you're trading on, and so forth. And so you see as we've covered this in the past, it's just a basic strategy that comes out of the box, and this just trading on overbought and oversold. So it's just using the RSI indicator right here. You say an order type, you want to use a limit or market order. And then so the bot loop is described in the documentation. So if you go to the documentation here, Freqtrade Basics, you'll see the terminology they use. So there's a strategy, so that's the strategy class. Okay, yeah, bot execution logic here. And so this describes the execution logic of the bot. And so it starts a loop, it populates indicators, it populates an entry trend and an exit trend, and it does a whole workflow here. And we can go, I'm going to do a whole strategy video, and so we can go over this in more detail, but it basically goes through a whole loop here. And so what you do in this populate indicators function here is you get a data frame of all your price data. If you want to run any functions here for calculating indicators, you can do that here and set that in the data frame. And so this is running the ADX, and it has a bunch of examples here if you want to try these out. RSI, fast stochastic, slow stochastic, MACD, all those things, money flow index, Bollinger Bands, all those. And you can try all these out, SAR, triple exponential moving average, tons of stuff. TA-libs, candlestick pattern stuff here, and so forth. And then so you can populate any indicators you want, and then you can use any of those in this populate entry trend. So you need to define an entry signal here. And so you take your data frame and you say, under these conditions, I'm going to set this enter long column in my data frame equal to 1. So these are my conditions under which I will enter a long position. And these here are my conditions where I will enter a short position, right? And then likewise, I also have an exit function here. And here you can say when you want to exit a long and when you want to exit a short. And if you populate the ROI and say exit at a 1% gain or populate a 10% stop loss here, then it will exit under those conditions. So you can exit in multiple ways if you hit your defined exit condition based on an indicator, or if you hit a condition that's based on your risk management conditions. So that's an overview of a strategy class in Freqtrade. I'll work with one of these more directly in the next video. I'll focus more on writing out one of these strategies, but let's go ahead and dive a little bit further into the components here. So this is kind of an overview and getting up and running. And so let's talk about this database for a bit. Let's look at what's inside of there. So that's a SQLite database. And so I can go to my command line, or I can use something like, let's say, Tables Plus. I think I have a copy of this. Let's run a Tables Plus. So you can download a Table Plus if you want to use a graphical user interface, and you can open this SQLite database. And so I can say, so if I run this, I can create a new connection, and I can say, I want to open a SQLite database, and then I can select a file. And I see in this listing, Trades v3 SQLite, so I can open this and click connect. So here on the left side, you can see the various tables that are in this database. And so there's orders right there. You can see, I ran this, you notice I'm wearing a different shirt now. I walked around for a bit. I came back, and you can see there's an order in here. So it's a buy order for Dogecoin. Apparently it hit the signal here. So this paper traded, so it bought some Dogecoin. So there's the trades table right here, and here is the orders table. And so you can see the amount that was filled, and then you can see in this trades table, you can see whether the trade is open or not. So this trade is actually still open. So an order was placed, that order was filled. It was a buy side limit order. It shows the number of tokens that were filled and at what price, and it has a timestamp. So these are all the various columns. You can see since we had it configured to only stake $100 US, it did 99.94 right there, and there you go. So it filled here, and there's the last update time. It's also stored right there. And then I can look in the trades table here. You can see that one trade was placed on the FTX exchange. It shows the pair, whether it's open or not. So that's true. It's one, so it's true. That means it's open, has a fee, so it takes into account fees for you. And yeah, so you can see the trade is open and it hasn't yet been closed. So Freqtrade stores the state of all your orders and trades in this database, and the Freqtrade user interface can query this database and display a visualization of what's going on. It can calculate your profit and loss and your returns and all of that. And yeah, let's go ahead and open up the Freqtrade user interface now. And so if you remember, I started up Freqtrade, and you can see that trade that trade was placed here in the logs. So if you want to see what happened in your logs, you can see all of that in detail here. And so we installed the Freqtrade UI. So if I go to my local host, so 127.0.0.1, port 8080, it says error empty response. So yeah, there's one thing I missed there. So if I go back here, I ran Docker Compose up, I brought this up, and then if I scroll back up to where I configured this earlier, so let me see if I can get there. You'll notice when I answered this question, insert API server listen address, it says 0.0.0.0 for Docker. We're using the Docker container. So the default value is 127.0.0.1. And that works if I'm installing Freqtrade manually and not using the Docker container. But for Docker, I need to use 0.0.0.0 here, and it will listen to the outside world and let my desktop access that. So let me go back here, and I'm going to do Control-C, and I'm going to stop the Docker container here. And then what we're going to do is go to our configuration file here. And I'm going to change this now. So even though I use that command line to set this up, I can go back in and set the listen address here to 0.0.0.0, just like that. You can see Freqtrade has stopped here. And now I can go ahead and do a Docker Compose up again. And it'll bring it right back up, and I'll attach it and start running. And since we have the state of this bot stored in here, it can come back up and see what's going on, right? It didn't just kill everything. So this is running. It picked up that trade was in, so it said found open trade. And so there's the trade record right there. And so now let me try going to my browser. And so you can see now when I've refreshed and went to localhost 8080, so I can do localhost 8080 just like that. It says, welcome to Freqtrade UI. This page allows you to control your bot. It has a link to the documentation, very nice. And then I can click trade here. You notice it's password protected. And so I can put a bot name here. So my default bot, or whatever you want to call it. This is the API URL. Earlier, I configured a password of 123456. You notice if I put the wrong one, it doesn't let me in. 123456, boom, I'm in. You can see it picked up from the database. It knows the state of the bot. This trade here is now up 0.4%, 0.38% right now. And if it hits 1%, according to our configuration, it will exit at a 1% profit. And if it falls to our stop loss or hits our exit condition, it will exit that trade automatically. And you can also see I can click this little button and say, hey, I don't want to be trading Dogecoin. Get me out of this right now. So I can manually override the bot and say, force exit at market price, and I'll just go ahead and sell Dogecoin for me. And so if I go over to my logs now, you should see where, yeah, so you see a RPC message right there. It says exit fill, FTX pair, Doge UST. So I entered in a market order right there. And you can see now I have no open trades, and it's going to wait again. But let's go ahead and look at this right here. You notice that entry right there. So there's some controls on this chart. It's not my favorite charting in the world. It's no trading view built in here, but it has some basic functionality. I can click this settings button right here, and you can see I have a main plot, and this isn't the most user-friendly thing, but I can do add new indicator, and I can plot different things. So if I wanted to plot RSI or whatever here, I can click save. And actually, no, what I need to do here, this is a little confusing. So I can have an indicator plot, or just call it RSI plot, just like that. I do that, and then I need to add a separate plot, otherwise it'll combine them. I want it to appear on a separate plot below, and then I can choose RSI, and I can choose the plot up here, the target, and I choose RSI plot, and I do save indicator, and then you see I have it down here below. And so you can see right here where the sample strategy that's built in looks at this oversold condition, and then you can see right here, I believe the way they have it programmed, they don't enter when it's under 30, they enter when it goes below 30, and then as soon as it crosses above 30. So this right here is where it crosses above 30, and that's the entry right there. So there's some visualization that's built in here. You can customize the plots a bit. You can see all the different pairs here, so you can see your profit and loss by pair. You can see here where I can stop the bot or restart the bot from the web. It shows my performance, currently up 0.4% here. So you see how I didn't wait for it to exit. I actually closed the trade just then. So it exited at market price. I locked in that 39 cents right there. My balance here started at $1,000. So it looks like by default, Freqtrade, when you're simulating it, gives you $1,000. And then it only staked $100 at the time. So we got 39 cents on $100, and we're up very little here. And then look at that. We just got another entry signal just hit. So this is Bitcoin Cash right here. And so if I were to switch over to Bitcoin Cash in this little drop down, one little bug I think I found in Freqtrade is switching between these right here seems to not always do what I expected to do. But if I go to pairs combined, this one seems right. So maybe there's a bug that they're fixing right now. And so you can see this most recent entry right there. I can hop over to this pair list tab here, and you can see I'm trading all these different pairs. But if I say, hey, I don't want to trade Dogecoin ever again, I can add it to my list here. And then even if it finds a signal for this particular currency pair, it's not going to enter that because it's on this list and it says, don't trade this thing. There's a few other views of our data. I can jump over to the dashboard, just a slightly different view that shows daily profit, cumulative profit, trade log, and so forth. There's a big chart, and then there's the logs. Looks just like the ones that are in our text file right here in the local directory, but what's nice here is that you can access it remotely from a web browser, which is pretty cool because something could go wrong with your bot and you want to see what's going on. Maybe you're on vacation and you're just one of those people that just can't let things run in the background and you want to log in remotely from your phone and see what's going on. You can check on it, restart it from the web, and so forth. So it's cool to have that remote control functionality. So I think that's a pretty good overview of getting Freqtrade up and running locally. So I'm going to cut this right here and then stay tuned for the next video. We'll talk a little bit more about backtesting, strategy, and all these other command line features. So this is a very detailed framework right here. So we'll go into some of this. And so stay with me. I'm going to keep making videos on this topic. So thanks a lot. See you next time. Bye. I'm up at least like $18 right now. I just went out to celebrate. Went to Target, the old American combo here, so I made enough from my trades to buy Chipotle burrito with guac. I got Jockey plain black t-shirts and a grande iced Americano with cream